Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jay LaPlante. I'm the Executive Director of Miami-Dade College's Miami Film Festival. Very thrilled to be presenting this panel with our amazing partners at Variety at last. This is our second consecutive year of presenting the annual list of 10 Latinxs to watch. Obviously, I have very much wanted to have this party in Miami. We typically do it at the March Film Festival. This year, for reasons that everyone knows, we weren't able to do that. But I'm very grateful that we are able to assemble here today as part of the Miami Film Festival's Fall Gems edition. And I know that all 10 of you are just amazing talent, and we will find your way to Miami Film Festival at another time in the future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Variety's features editor, Melina Saval, to lead the conversation. Thank you, Melina.
Hi, everyone. And yes, I so wanted to be in Miami this year. I was definitely there in spirit, and let's all hope that we will be there together in person next year. But I'm so thrilled to talk to all of you now because you're all doing such amazing things in the entertainment space. And I'm really glad to be here today so that I can speak to you all about what you're doing and how you're making headwaves in the biz. Chesca, I'll talk to you first. So you were signed by Chaim Saban, and we all know Chaim. He's the creator of Power Rangers and also has his own musical arm, if you will. And so he took a liking to your music and was just floored by it. What was it like to have somebody with such clout and prestige and, quite frankly, power in the business, to take an interest in your work as a Latinx artist?
Truly an honor. I mean, Chaim is a legend, and I actually loved the Power Rangers growing up. So, I mean, to have someone like Chaim believe in my talent and put so much love and support into my career and making things happen, because everything that's been happening has been thanks to him and the company and Saban Music Group.
Awesome. So Angel, I wanted to talk to you about critical thinking. John Leguizamo, big name. I'm a huge fan.
Yep.
What was it like working with him? Tell us about that experience.
Man, it was a big dream of mine, because I had a moment in my theater class that I had in high school. And it came at the right time, because originally I was trying to enlist in the Army, and I had this amazing teacher named Michelle Perkins that I got declined because I had asthma. And then I went through my emotions and whatnot because I didn't know really what I was going to do next. And she was like, you know what, to be honest, I'm glad it happened because I see you doing more good in this world, with a script in your hand than I do a rifle. And when she said that, I kind of had to sit with that. And she showed me, I believe, Freak. She showed me his one-man show. And I was like, man, this is the guy, I can follow in these footsteps. I can do something. I can write whatever it is. I can figure it out. But this is an avenue that I could take. And so fast forward to be able to work with this man that I've, dreamed of doing work like him, and then to be side by side with him was just a full circle moment. And to be able to do that in my hometown, in Miami, particularly in the neighborhoods that I grew up, because I grew up in Liberty City. So we got to go around Alapata, Overtown, all these spots where, it was and still is home to me. And to be able to go back and do art in these spots, I was like, let's keep it going. But definitely John is an amazing human being. I learned so much from him as an actor.
You play Pappy on Pose, which is gotten so much praise, deservedly so. I'm wondering, did you learn anything from John Leguizamo that kind of helped you prepare for that role?
You know what's crazy? So I went and I shot that with John, and John gave me the biggest tip, you know, that I was so excited to go ahead and implement that when I went back to season 2. John was like, yo, you gotta be mindful of the camera. Where is it? You always gotta be asking what lens, you know? And that landed on me. And the second I went back to pose, I was like, what's up with the lens? You know, and I was always mindful of the camera. Where are we going? You know, what kind of shot is this? Why is it? You know, and I started asking all these questions that I never felt comfortable enough as an actor to ask. But because being on set with John, and John gave me that permission, I was like, oh, okay. So this is something I could do. I could ask these questions because it's just gonna make my life easier as an actor, and it's gonna make everybody's life easier on set when I know what the deal is. So that was a huge tip that he gave me.
Julissa, wanted to talk to you about Gentefied, which I think is really interesting because we don't see a lot of Dominican stories being portrayed on TV. I don't know if it's a first. I'm not sure, but it's certainly a rarity. And wanted to talk to you about what that was like, that you were able to, you know, represent that story and the Dominican, you know, community.
It's an honor. We have seen a couple stories, but not like deep dive, I would say. I think one of the first times we've seen it specifically like on Netflix was for like Orange is the New Black, where there's a lot of Dominican characters, but not like I don't think it was highlighted. But most importantly, before I'm like honored because it's in front of the screen for people to see themselves, I was honored because the role was originally for a Mexican girl. And I was actually, they passed on me twice because obviously I don't look like a Mexican girl. And my accent wasn't from East LA, but I kept getting a call back. And then towards the end of it, when I think when I went for the chemistry read, which like I said, they passed on me twice, my manager randomly called me and he's like, so I'm gonna mess up your whole world right now because they want to see you again. And I was like, well, I haven't changed. Like I'm still the same girl. And I went in and they gave me notes, which was to dial down my accent and get a coach maybe to sound more from East LA. And so I did that. And 2 hours before the audition, I decided I wasn't gonna go in as a girl from East LA because I just I felt like my acting was going to suffer. I didn't tell my manager, I just went in and did it. And right before I left the room, I decided, which I feel like Angel just said like something that like resonated with me, how he went on set and he was like, where's the lens? And was free to say these things, like to talk and use your voice as an actor. And I think I like had something inside of me tell me the same thing that day when I finished my audition. And all the execs were in the room and I was like, can I just say something? And obviously they gave me the floor. And I told them that I knew I wasn't an East LA girl and I didn't read as an East LA girl, and that I'm very much an East Coast girl, but no one was gonna do the job better than me. And I think because of that, and just because I gave them everything I had in me, obviously I booked it, and they ended up rewriting the character to be a Dominican girl from East Coast who moved to LA, which is like the biggest honor. For that to be my breakout role and for that to be the yes, I couldn't have asked for anything greater. And I think it's like a step in the right direction for Hollywood, because I think so oftentimes we just see Mexican stories, or if we talk about another a Latino, it's a Puerto Rican, and that's not who we all are, and we all don't look the same, and we all don't speak Spanish the same. So I think it's great. I'm so happy and thrilled that little girls who look like me can see themselves on camera.
What I also love about that story is, yes, you bring up such a key point that when people say Latino, Latina, they lump everything together and think it's one look, one national, one type of person, which clearly it's not. But also, LA is such a melting pot where people are coming in from all over the country. So I actually love that because I think it's more representative of LA as a whole as well. Yeah, and it's a wonderful show. Carolina, wanted to talk to you because you have an interesting backstory. you were working as an assistant to a photojournalist, I believe, when you were about 14 years old. And that's what kind of initiated your interest in filmmaking. Tell us a little bit about that. And where exactly, you were in Brazil. Where exactly were you, and how did that open your mind up to this whole world of cinematography?
I was raised in Rio, in Brazil. So, and then I think when I was 14, I started working, like processing film rolls, was still all black and white for this photojournalist. And kind of like, I think I found my passion for images in that dark room and doing that work. And that's kind of what my career, that's how I started pursuing. And then eventually, Rio got to a point that was extremely violent, and I felt like what was happening with the communities around what I wasn't being portrayed with the right lens, and wasn't being talked about it or anything through journalism. So I felt like actually journalism at that point was quite restrictive and not actually changing the environment. And that's kind of when I started falling in love with films, and thinking that maybe through that was a possibility of I don't know, helping change your surroundings. But at that point, there was just like no film school or anything. I didn't know anybody that, I think there was like a friend that I think his father was a cinematographer. So I was like, oh, that's possible. So I started kind of like trying to gather information, and then eventually I left the country and I went to study in England, and that's what I started working in the film industry.
Tell us a little bit about your film Hala, which you were the cinematographer on. It premiered in Apple One last December. Tell us what it was like working on that film.
It was a fantastic experience. It's a very personal story to Min Ho Baig, the director. Who is a Muslim American girl, and she's raised in Chicago. So the main character, Hala, has that similar story. It's a very intimate movie. And it's really about, her coming of age, growing out of trying to kind of define her identity within her culture, from where her parents come from and where she was being brought up in the US. It caught my attention because it was the first time I read a script that had that story, and it was the first time I was like, oh, this is great. I haven't seen that girl on the screen yet, and I felt a lot of people could connect. And I think from that on was kind of finding my own connections through the project, because obviously I had a very different upbringing. And I think even though I was raised in Brazil and Catholic, very different than, the character of Hala was, I felt like the relationship that she had with her mother was something that I could relate to. And, this part of our lives that sometimes we become the parents and they become the kids, and the swap of roles, it was kind of interesting, and I could, see myself into that.
Mariana, I want to talk to you about your role in Pablo Larraín's Emma. You play a very interesting character. She's a dancer. She's going through a lot of emotional turmoil. You got rave reviews. Are you like the main character in real life? I'm assuming no. And what was your inspiration for playing this really dynamic, interesting character? Not always likable, too.
I love Emma. I know that not all the people love her, but I'm really in love of my character. I think that she's super attractive and profound, and I think that it's a reflection of our generation, of our times. I live in a very conservative country, Chile, so I think that Pablo was and is very brave to put her on this main role character. My inspirations, it wasn't a conventional, I don't know how to say it, construction of a role, because it all started with the exterior of this. We didn't have a script. We didn't make table work. It all started with the dance and how she dressed up, and it it was all very new for me. I came from soap operas, from TV series. So the dialogue with Pablo and then with Gael on the set was super important, and the respect between us. And it was a whole experience. For me, a life-changing experience.
Amazing, thank you. Gonzalo, a fantastic woman. You won, that film won the Oscar in 2017 for Best Foreign Language Film. I adore that film. What a movie, gorgeously filmed, everything about it. I could talk about just that film, but one thing about you that's very interesting, you also wrote Gloria, which was remade in the United States as Gloria Bell. One thing that's interesting about you is I believe you started off, well, a few things that are interesting. You started off as a critic, correct? So I'm interested in how you straddle that, how you go from a critic to being a filmmaker. And I can see how that, I mean, as a critic, you must have had you have a deep love for film. I want to ask you about that. And then I'd also love to hear, you moved to London to basically, you knew English, but to improve your English to the point where you could write in English. Those two things I think are so fascinating about you.
Yeah, I'm started as a film critic. So that's the thing, like when you start analyzing film and which first you watch a lot of film, you have a lot of references, and then you have a lot of criticisms about the films. So then you decide to step up and try to make films. It's kind of blind in a way, like you're not really thinking what you're doing. But also it's very different experience, and actually it's very different to be on the other side and trying to pretty much do what you think is good. And I really enjoy the process. I was a critic like for 15 years, and then I became a writer, and we worked with Sebastian Lelio and for 4 films, and did a lot of TV series. And then I decided to move to London because I wanted to prove myself in English better as a writer, because even if I knew the language, it's not the same thing that if you want to write a script, right? And I want to prove myself, and also I wanted to, just try, and I love it. And I've been living here for the last 4 years, and I've been working on scripts, and it's pretty much, it's funny that if you like a story, it's like an international language. It's like the language of a storytelling is just one language, and then whatever you do with that, it's just you translate to the language you're writing. But basically, and actually another thing is like English is a nicer language for screenwriting than Spanish.
What do you mean by that?
All the Latin languages, we can talk a lot. We can say a lot of things and not saying pretty much anything. Like we just talk, And in English, for some reason, you need to construct. It's moving towards action, and it has to be very precise. If you want to write, you need to find the exact word, and the construction has to be very precise. So in a way, it helps you to write more specific into the actions or into the scenes. So I think I like it. I think I learn a lot about screenwriting, writing in a different language.
Are you writing primarily in English right now, or?
Well, it depends. It depends on the story. But basically, yeah. Usually I started in Spanish. Okay. And then I realized, no, why? Like this will be an English project. So just click. And at the beginning was more like a problem. But now it's like a click. It's not that difficult.
Cesar, last but certainly not least, I want to talk to you about High and Mighty. Came out about 2 years ago. Wanted you to talk about your vision of the show. It was on HBO. What prompted you to create it? And then I want to talk to you about The Simpsons, but I want to talk to you first about High and Mighty.
Sure, yeah. It was originally, I wrote a spec, like kind of what they call a stunt spec, or not a spec, like a stunt pilot, like just something to get you noticed. Like sometimes people write a crazy thing like, this is a Golden Girls spec where they all take acid, or like a Seinfeld spec that happened on 9/11, like a crazy thing that like it'll never make it to the air, but someone will read it and say, this person's pretty funny. I at least want to meet them for a meeting. I didn't have representation at the time. So I wrote something in that vein. I knew someone who did visual effects and was basically like, I'm not a writer, but I can do low tech visual effects that like not outer space stuff, but just something on the ground. And so I started thinking of something in the vein of like a superhero story, but very lo-fi, kind of like Shyamalan's Unbreakable. But like, what if I mixed it with Friday? So that was the initial idea, and I wrote that pilot, and then it got to Stage 13, who kind of wanted to see if they could kind of like convert it into a web series. And so together, through workshopping it with the execs over there, we turned it into a web series, and then it ended up getting into, Sundance, and then being cut together as kind of like a feature, and then ended up on HBO Latino for a year. And currently we're kind of workshopping it to see if we can, do it for streaming, like as a 30-minute series. But, we'll see, fingers crossed.
And I believe currently, are you the only Latino writer on the staff of The Simpsons? And how long have you been with The Simpsons now?
I've been there for about 2.5 years. And yeah, I am. And the second writer, Valentina Garza, who was there before my time, she was the first Latina writer. So I'm the second, following in her footsteps.
I mean, what is it like in terms of, I don't watch every episode of The Simpsons, but I've watched it enough.
Oh, guys, I don't think we do.
It's something you go back to, and I'm wondering, like, your input as a Latino writer and how you can kind of influence the characters on that show and bring a little bit of Latinx culture into the show. How is that currently working out?
What's funny is that I don't want to spoil it too much, but we're working on a kind of a whole scene that takes place in Spanish right now for someone's episode that's coming up. And that was just really fun, because at first we were like, oh yeah, this would be interesting to do. But then it was like, what if we don't do subtitles? What if the whole thing is in Spanish?
Yes, I love that.
And yeah, and so it's really fun. And then we just had to kind of like, again, without giving up away what it is we're kind of like parodying or whatever, watch the kind of shows that we're kind of emulating, but kind of in a loving way. And yeah, it's really fun. And certainly I'm, as the Spanish speaker in the room, and the only Latinx person in the room, I'm not writing that episode, but the writer of that episode completely kind of left it up to me, and was happy to kind of have me not just translate it, but kind of like, this is a joke that's in Spanish, right? Does it make sense in Spanish? Not just something that we're translating from English that won't translate or whatever. But yeah, it's a very open room and an open experience. And there's only but so many Latino characters on the show, so I don't just pipe up when it's time for Julio or Bumblebee Man or whoever to talk. Like, I have an input on kind of every character,
I mean, I'm assuming the show, and you probably can't give this away, but because we're living during a very politically fraught era right now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of really interesting things to come up around that, and possibly the Latinx community. I don't know if you can hint that might be featured a little bit in the show.
Sure. I mean, what's funny is that we have one of our EPs, Matt Selman, is kind of like, he says it's almost harder to do the show than it's ever been, because everything is so politically charged, and everything is like, it's one thing to make fun of, and this is, 20 years ago or whatever, they did an episode on gun control. But like now it's like, you can't do it, at least The Simpsons can't really do a show about school shootings. South Park can do a show about school shootings, right. But just the vein of what the show is. So it gets harder to do, like they did a show about immigration, I don't know, 10 years ago, 9 years ago or something. Yeah. And even then it was different than like, if I want to pitch something on immigration now, it's like, are we going to talk about ICE? Are we going to talk about, like Leyeras and all that stuff? Like it's almost too sad to like make fun of. So it's really this high wire act of like, where is the joke in this, where we can make fun of not obviously the people that are being oppressed, but of the oppressors or whatever. I have an episode, my first episode will be airing on this Sunday. By the time people see this on the 9th, it will have been the previous Sunday, but on the 4th of October, my episode comes out, and it's got some political stuff in there. It's kind of about, it's an episode set in ancient Rome, but there are a lot of parallels to kind of stuff that's going on today. And it's great to be on a show that isn't afraid to kind of still poke fun at, everything, especially upward,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, do you think that parody and satire are dead? We hear that so often, just to kind of dovetail on your point.
No, there was a thing on Twitter where someone like pointed out articles that were written in like, you know, post World War II, like post 9/11, post, you know, like there's always kind of like, oh, is comedy dead? And obviously it never is. It keeps changing what it is and what it can be, but that's comedy in general. That's jokes that even the most innocuous ones that used to be funny in 1985 now are just kind of like hacky or whatever. So it's always changing, and you just kind of gotta roll with it and get a pulse of the culture and sense where you can find that joke, you know?
Chesca, I wanted to go back to you. It was announced yesterday that you are going to be performing at the this year's Latin Billboard Awards. Tell me, what are we going to see? What can you share? What does it feel like?
By the way, I quickly want to say that everyone's story is incredible and extremely motivating. Thank you for sharing. I'm like blown away with everyone's story. Going back to the Billboard, super excited. It's my very first time performing for my own song. So it's a big, big moment. It's going to be lots of dancing, explosive, powerful, and can't wait to represent all Latinas out there with all of our fire and what we do, you know, so very exciting.
We spoke about this a little earlier, but I grew up with a lot of Frankie Valli, a lot of doo-wop and a lot of 50s and 60s songs. And you too, that was an influence on your life and your music. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I started when I was 11 years old with my dad. He had a band called Flashback. And we used to go around town in Puerto Rico, which in Puerto Rico was a thing, to do little like gigs and like clubs like Chili's and Oyster Bar and, you know, like those type of restaurants. So I was like 10, 11 years old singing with my dad in these places. So I used to sing Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. I sang songs by Frank Sinatra. I sang songs by Michael Jackson. So since I was a very little girl, it was like, it's been a part of my life this whole time. And to be able to do an interpolation of Can't Take My Eyes Off of You in Spanish with Pitbull, it's just like, it's amazing. It's truly amazing. And to have the blessing of Frankie Valli, you know, because he could have been like, I don't like that. You're not singing reggaeton to my songs. But we took the elements of like the reggaeton and like, you know, what's going on in the urban world, and we made it a really cool melodic pop urban song. So he was super excited.
And you also have a really inspiring backstory, which I want to talk to you about. When you were 11 years old, there was an accident. You don't have to get into specifics, but it sidelined you from your musical dreams for many, many years. What was that like, and what was your driving force to come back and persevere despite, you know, the setback?
Well, actually, my biggest goal in this career is to share my story, and to share my story of will and being a survivor and continuing to follow your dreams, even though it seemed impossible. I actually got signed when I was 11 years old to Sunny Music Latin. And just a few months later, I was celebrating with my father that we were, you know, taking this opportunity, and, you know, I was going to be a development act. So we went on a boat ride, and I unfortunately fell, and my hair got cut up in my dad's propeller, and it got ripped off. So long story short, my hair gets cut up in the propeller. I lose 70% of my hair and scalp. And I went through 17 reconstructive surgeries to recover all my hair and scalp. And it was 10 years of recovery. So as you know, obviously I wasn't able to continue following my dreams because it was just impossible. And I was in a hospital for 10 years, on and off, in and out. But, you know, it made me who I am right now. It made me the strong woman that I am right now. And it makes what I'm doing so much more powerful and so much more inspiring, that if I'm doing this, I'm getting goosebumps, but if I'm doing this and getting to perform at the Billboard Awards and doing songs with Frankie Valli and Pitbull, like, everyone can do what their dreams are, you know, like, I mean, I overcame it, and it's part of my life, and it's part of who I am. And I hope that my story can move and motivate a lot of people out there that don't have the motivation for whatever reason or whatever they're going through.
Was there anything during that moment, during that period of your life when you were feeling down, was there any music, artists that you listened to that acted as a salve or just help you through those moments?
Absolutely. I mean, it was part of why I continued performing with my dad, because I was able to disguise what was going through under my hat. You know, I had to wear all these big hats because the treatments that I was getting, they were very noticeable and very extreme. So I actually started singing with my dad. I continued singing through my whole entire teenage years with big hats and just like being able to continue working on my craft. And yes, like Michael Jackson has always been a huge motivation, inspiration in my music career, and his music. I mean, I always imitated him, Janet Jackson, Aretha, Tina Turner. I'm an entertainer, you know, so that's what I'm drawn. I'm like so inspired by performers that those were my main inspirations growing up. That helped me get through all of the stuff that I was going through.
One more question for you, and then I'm going to open it up to something I want to ask everybody else. But as an entertainer, as a live entertainer, I have to ask, you know, COVID has been so difficult for people who thrive and survive through their art of live entertainment. How have you been getting through kind of, you know, especially that period where you couldn't, you couldn't sing to crowds of people, you know, in most places you still can't. What was your kind of coping mechanism?
It's very interesting because at first I was like, oh my God, I'm cursed. Like, I'm never going to do this. Like, time, it just keeps going by. And I'm just like, and because right before COVID happened, me and Pitbull, we were going to go on tour, and I was opening for 23 of his shows. So imagine like that like anxiety of like, oh my God, I'm going to, and you know, I'm going to go and perform and like do what I love. And then boom, that happens. But it's interesting that in the scheme of all of this, I've done so much. Like, I've actually done way more than I've ever done. You know, I released 2 records. I shot 2 videos. And yes, with all like the precautions and everything, like with COVID, but it's been very interesting of like how much I've done through all of this. And as a new artist, you know, people are still getting to know me. They're still getting to grow with me, learn my music. So it didn't really affect me so much because I kept a lot of positive like energy and just like, I'm just gonna keep going to the gym. I'm gonna keep working out, like dancing around my house, singing, like it doesn't matter. So I kept working on my crafts because now we have the show. So I'm like ready, you know, I feel like I've been practicing. So, and I've been learning how to play the piano. And like, I think I discovered talents I didn't even know I had through all of this. And to me, it's been an interesting experience. And I'm sure everyone else that has, you know, find interesting talents they didn't know they'd had through all of this.
Yeah, I actually, I want to go around. We'll start with Angel. Production was halted. People didn't know what was going to happen. How did you deal with this period of uncertainty?
Oh my God. What's crazy is, so I had just been on maybe a 6-month hiatus before going back to shoot season 3 of Pose. I'm there for 3 weeks and they're like, go.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it starts off, okay, it'll be a week, 2 weeks, and then you just hear nothing. And you understand because you're like, okay, this shit really just hit the fan.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, the first couple of weeks were hard because I had already been home for 5 months and I had this ache, you know what I'm saying, where I'm my best self when I'm on a set. And I was fiending, you know, I was like, somebody get me back to something. But I think it was perfect because it allowed me the opportunity to step back and realize that I'm my own individual outside of work. And I got to do things, this is gonna sound ridiculous, like reading. I've always had a hard time with education. I've not been the best student. I've not had the best tools. I've not had the best teachers or system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And finally I had all this time, right? Where I'm just like, okay, people are dying here. Like, what do you want to do with this freedom that you have? Because it's freedom, right? I had the resources to be able to stay at home, which not a lot of people had, and not worry about, you know, how I'm going to pay for my next meal or, you know, where's rent money coming from? So I was like, this is an opportunity. Find out what the opportunity is. And I realized for me, a lot of it had to do with education and educating myself. And then the other big part of it was community and family. I realized that there were, you know, little hurdles that I had to overcome with family and friends to make sure that those relationships became more fruitful. And that's what I was able to do.
Julissa, how about you? Did you pick up a skill you didn't know you had? I mean, I've spoken to artists and actors who suddenly they're, you know, it really brought out their inner Julia child, and now they've discovered they can cook. For everyone, it's been different. That wasn't my experience. I'm still a terrible cook, but perhaps perhaps it's different for you.
Oh, I'm a Dominican girl. I know how to cook.
Okay.
Before the pandemic, I knew how to cook. No, actually, I was in Miami for this. Actually, when all of this was started, and so I decided not to come back to LA because I felt like, well, everybody was like kind of just, we were in a no man's land, right? No one knew what was going on, and I was like, well, if I'm home and something happens and it's crazy, at least I'm like with people that I know that are gonna like take care of me. And so I stayed in Miami for about a month, and I think that was the best thing that I think happened, because I stayed with my mom, and I don't get that much time with my mom usually. So I actually learned about things that I didn't know in our family, my grandma and her sisters. I learned so many secrets, just like because me and my mom would go to the backyard and sit down and talk, and I'm very close to her, but I think something about this pandemic allowed for us to get even closer and be a little more vulnerable, because I think we both were thinking we don't know what's going on. I was there for like a month. Then I came to LA, and I saw that nothing was happening here, and I actually got right back on a plane back to Miami, which people were not flying, but I was like, whatever, I'll be okay. The planes were empty, and I went right back to Miami, and I stayed with my mom another month. And I think, that has been like the best part of the pandemic. It was just having the quality time and being able to sit still. I think that most people are saying this was like the worst year ever. I think this is actually the best year I've ever had. In regards to who I am as a person, I got to grow, I got to sit still. And I think that a lot of times we don't want to sit still because we don't want to be with ourselves, but that is truly what you need sometimes when you don't think you need those things. But I was able to look inward. I was able to develop my mindset, my spirituality, and being able to, I read a lot more as well. Like just those things, those little things that we sometimes take for granted. I didn't take it for granted. I learned to embrace it, and I'm very happy. I think that's what I got out of this. I'm extremely happy.
Mariana, you're not in the United States right now, so you probably have a completely different perspective. But what is your perspective on the business as a whole? I mean, one of your goals is to work more in mainstream Hollywood, I believe, and be a part of the industry. Are there opportunities for you right now, though, given how crazy everything is?
First of all, in Chile, the situation was, and it is now, super hard, especially for my colleagues and artists. We don't have a lot of help from the government, so a lot of friends, or my boyfriend, for example, are, I don't know how to reinvent themselves. Me, I worked in different or experimental formats. I made a theater play, but by WhatsApp. So we are all trying different formats and stuffs to survive mentally and, of course, practically. So now I'm in Barcelona because I just arrived from San Sebastian Film Festival. I was presenting La Verónica, another film. And yes, of course, I'm making some tapes for the States. I work with UTA, so I really want to live in Europe next year. So I'm to stay. I don't know how to say it in English. Sorry, to make my
breakthrough
home there.
Home.
my base, my
Your base.
Yeah.
Your base.
Dilo en español, dilo en español.
Mi base allá.
Gonzalo, yeah, I mean, I'd love, maybe just as a way to shift, like, what are you working on right now?
Well, a lot of things. First, since the pandemic, all the product producers were calling writers and saying, well, maybe we should do some rewriting on the film we were working on. So actually, I've been doing a lot of rewriting. And basically that, and then, well, a lot of projects and you know, I'm very superstitious. I never say anything about the things I'm doing because I don't think they're gonna go in a very good direction if you say something about them. You know, it's like
right. Okay.
But basically, TV, you know, development project for streamers. I have a friend who always says everything is a lie. In the sense, if you start mentioning and dropping names and working with this one and that one and this different network or whatever, at the beginning when you're just starting, it's a lie, and then it maybe it's true. When it happens, it's true, but in the meantime, it's just a lie. You don't have to believe in it.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way to look at things. Cesar, I know you're working on The Simpsons now. You know, animation is one of the areas in which things are kind of thriving because it doesn't require actors to be on set. But were there any challenges that were experienced over the past several months?
It was actually relatively smooth. I mean, we kind of zoomed it up like almost 2 weeks before everyone else did. And at first, like everyone else, we were like, that sounds a little alarmist. That sounds a little crazy. We'll probably be back here in 2 weeks to a month or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, famous last words like 7 months ago. But no, even the creative process of being in a room, being in a writer's room, you know, 8 people or whatever, just kind of pitching on a joke, going down on a screen, like it's perfect for Zoom. I mean, of course, there's that missed, just kind of general camaraderie of being in the room with someone and like, you know, a really great joke and people dying laughing together and seeing that together. But, you know, sometimes we just, you know, there's a little bit of like, what'd you say? I think you froze and I can't, but you know, once you get over that, it's pretty easy to kind of keep doing that. I mean, it was a little bit of a hiccup with recording actors and setting up mics and all this stuff or, you know, actors have to be the ones that set up their mics and their booths in a sense at home. But, you know, beyond that, it's been, you know, pretty much full steam ahead. And it's been crazy how much we've been able to, you know, move forward. We certainly feel like we've been fortunate, you know, compared to so many people that work in live action and have had to halt and hold and then, you know, see how things are shaping up or whatever.
Carolina, how about you? What are you working on and how have you faced the past several months of the challenges that the world has presented?
I think at first was, I guess for as most people, was really hard. You know, if you're a director of photography, you must be like a set junkie, you know, you just need that adrenaline, you need to be on set and you need 200 questions per minute being asked and the pressure of time and everything. So being at home for me and just being like quiet, and I tend to go, maybe I'll take a week or 2 in between 2 jobs, but I never take like long holidays or anything like that. So it was really hard. I haven't, you know, for many years, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years, I haven't had amount of time to be at home. But then I kind of started like, I don't know, discovering also like, you know, to have time with my girlfriend and my dogs and just be at home. It was just actually great, and like a great, like, I guess, spiritual journey, as Julissa was saying, is like just you can improve in yourself. And I also had the time to do, I always loved teaching, and because of the work, I never had time to do, maybe I'll do one workshop a year or something like that. And because of this time and then people wanting to learn and you know, having facility that you can do it online now, I gave a few different workshops in cinematography, and a lot of, was able to connect with particularly a lot of young women, a lot of Latina young women, US, and I gave a class to students in Budapest and Hungary, and there were a few women from Brazil and Mexico. And, you know, that was just like so inspiring to be able to connect with them. And that day for them was a little better than the day before. And then to have that, I don't know, their interaction. And and to also just prepare for the classes. I don't know, just like felt like everything that I got, you know, from my career and the people I met through my path, that I was, you know, be able to give it back now as well, and be able to support this younger generation that's coming.
Thank you. We have a couple more minutes. I'd like to ask you all where you think you'll be in a year from now, or where you would like to be 1 year from now.
For starters, I like to be shaking somebody's hand. This is weird. Because I just got back to set. We're you know, in the process of kicking production back up. You know, our set is such a close knit group of people, and we're very like, you know, hugs. We love each other. Yay! This is a beautiful environment, because it is. But there's no more of that. You know, and that's weirdly enough proving to be a challenge, because you want that level of interaction with people, you know? So yeah, I'm gonna keep it at that, shaking somebody's hand.
I like that. Me too. Anybody else?
On the road.
Amen to that. Absolutely.
On set, working, performing, please.
It's gonna happen. We got some time. I think by next year we'll be back into the swing of things, right? There will be a new normal, obviously, but I think we'll be back into the swing of things. I feel like we're slowly getting there.
Sadly, for when you're a writer, your life is pretty much the same. So you will be like touring, dancing, and doing stuff, and we'll be isolated in my home.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. It was an honor to speak to all of you, and may we be able to get together in person, be it in Miami, be it somewhere else. But I really appreciate you guys gathering today, and thank you so much, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.